If I could only recommend one food to someone struggling with blood sugar, just one, there is a clear answer. And it's probably not what you'd guess. It's not a superfood. It's not expensive. You won't find it in the supplement aisle. It's been sitting in grocery stores for decades, and most people walk right past it. But when I looked at the research, and I mean really looked, one food kept showing up again and again, in study after study, across different countries, different age groups, different stages of blood sugar problems. One food consistently performed better than almost anything else, and the reason it works is something most people have never had explained to them properly. Today I'm going to show you exactly what that food is, but I'm not going to just name it and move on. That wouldn't help you. Because knowing what to eat isn't enough. You need to understand why it works. When you understand the why, the choice becomes obvious. You won't need willpower. You won't need to memorize a list. You'll just know. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to walk you through how blood sugar actually works inside your body in plain language anyone can follow. Then I'll show you several foods that can help support healthy levels. Each one plays a role. But as we go, you'll start to notice that one food keeps checking more boxes than all the others. And when we finally reach it, you'll see exactly why the research points to it so consistently. Stay with me all the way through, because near the end, I'll show you the simplest way to put all of this into practice. One change, one meal. That's all it takes to begin. Let's start with something that trips up a lot of people. And once I clear this up, everything else will fall into place. I've talked with so many people who felt completely overwhelmed when they got their blood sugar numbers back. Some had been told they were pre-diabetic and had no idea what that even meant. Others had been living with type 2 diabetes for years and still didn't fully understand what was happening inside their bodies. The information they'd been given was either too complicated or too vague to be useful. That's what I want to fix right now, because this isn't as complicated as it seems once someone explains it in plain language. Most people think managing blood sugar is all about cutting things out. No bread, no rice, no potatoes, no fruit. And yes, watching how much sugar and refined starch you eat matters, but that's only half the story. The other half, the part almost nobody talks about, is what you add. Certain foods actually help your body handle sugar more efficiently. They slow down how fast glucose enters your blood. They help your cells respond to insulin. Some of them even support the tiny organisms living inside your gut that play a major role in blood sugar regulation. That shift in thinking from only removing foods to also adding the right ones is where real progress begins. But before I show you those foods, you need to understand what's actually happening inside your body, because this is the key to understanding why that one food works so well. And it's simpler than you think. When you eat, your body breaks food down into basic parts. Carbohydrates, found in bread, rice, fruit, and many everyday foods, get converted into glucose. That's a type of sugar. And it's actually the fuel your body runs on. So glucose itself isn't the problem. The problem is what happens when there's too much of it sitting in your blood. Here's how it's supposed to work. After a meal, glucose enters your bloodstream. Your pancreas detects the rise and releases insulin. Think of insulin as a key. Every cell in your body has a little lock on it. Insulin opens those locks so glucose can move out of your blood and into your cells, where it gets used for energy. When this system works well, your blood sugar goes up after eating, then comes back down within a couple hours. Smooth, steady, no issues. But over time, from years of processed food, too much sugar, too little movement, the locks on your cells start getting stiff. Insulin shows up with the key, turns it. Nothing happens. So your pancreas pumps out more insulin, trying harder. For a while, that works. But eventually, the pancreas can't keep up. Now you've got glucose piling up in your blood with nowhere to go. That's insulin resistance. And it's at the heart of type 2 diabetes and prediabetes. It affects far more people than most realize, including many who haven't been officially diagnosed yet. Now here's the part that most people never hear explained clearly. You can actually influence this process with food. Certain foods can help those stiff locks start working again. They can make your cells more sensitive to insulin, they can slow down how fast glucose floods your bloodstream, and they can calm the kind of chronic inflammation that makes insulin resistance worse over time. Some foods do one of those things, a few do too, but the food I recommend most, the one I'll reveal later in this conversation, does all three at once. That's what sets it apart. First, though, let me show you several supporting foods. Each one plays a role. And understanding what they do will help you see why the top food is so special when we get there. Let's start with leafy greens. Spinach, kale, Swiss chard. These foods have almost no carbohydrates. A big bowl of spinach has fewer carbs than a single bite of bread. But that's not the interesting part. The real value is a mineral called magnesium. Dark leafy greens are loaded with it, and magnesium plays a direct role in how your body uses insulin. Think of it this way. If insulin is the key, magnesium is the oil that keeps the lock turning smoothly. Without enough of it, the lock gets sticky. Insulin can't do its job as well, and blood sugar stays higher than it should. Research consistently shows that people who eat more magnesium-rich foods have a lower risk of developing type 2 diabetes. And here's the concern. Many adults over 50 aren't getting nearly enough. A woman I spoke with, in her late 60s, had been watching her fasting blood sugar creep higher for more than a year. Her doctor started her on medication, but she also began adding spinach to a morning smoothie and a side salad at dinner. After a few months, her numbers had come down, not from the greens alone. She was on medication too, and watching her portions more carefully. But she told me she felt like her body had been missing something, and the greens filled that gap. Given what the research tells us about magnesium and insulin function, she was probably onto something real. Now, leafy greens are a smart addition to your plate, but they're not the food I recommend most for blood sugar. Not even close. They address one piece of the puzzle, magnesium and insulin sensitivity, but the food I have in mind addresses several pieces at once. We'll get there. But first, the next food surprised me when I saw how strong the research actually was. Berries, blueberries, strawberries, blackberries, raspberries. A lot of people with blood sugar concerns avoid all fruit. I understand why. Fruit has sugar, but berries tell a very different story. They're lower in sugar than most fruits. A cup of blueberries has about 15 grams, that's less than a banana, and they come packaged with something that changes how your body handles that sugar. Fiber. Berries are full of it. Fiber acts like a traffic controller for glucose. Instead of sugar rushing into your blood all at once, fiber lets it trickle in slowly, a gentle stream instead of a flood. But the real surprise is what gives berries their color. Compounds called anthocyanins. Those deep blues, reds, and purples aren't just pretty. Multiple studies suggest these compounds may help improve insulin sensitivity, meaning they help your cells respond better to insulin. There's also evidence they may help lower chronic inflammation. A large review combining data from many studies found that people who ate berries regularly had measurably better markers of blood sugar control compared to those who didn't. Not dramatic overnight transformations, steady, modest improvements, the kind that add up over years and make a real difference. So if you've been avoiding all fruit because of blood sugar, berries deserve a second look. A small handful with breakfast or as an afternoon snack gives you those compounds without causing a big spike. But berries still aren't the food I want you to remember most. They address inflammation and insulin sensitivity through anthocyanins, and that's valuable. But the strongest evidence actually points to another food entirely. We're getting closer. First, here's something practical that makes an immediate difference. Nuts, especially almonds and walnuts. For years, people avoided nuts because they're high in fat, but we now know the type of fat matters far more than the amount. The fats in nuts, monounsaturated and polyunsaturated, are among the healthiest you can eat. For blood sugar, nuts work as a speed bump. They slow everything down. A handful of almonds has only about 6 grams of carbs, and when you eat nuts alongside a meal, the fat and protein moderate the blood sugar response from the whole meal. Here's a tip I give to almost everyone I talk with. If you're eating fruit or toast, pair it with a small handful of nuts. That combination can blunt the spike. It's one of the simplest strategies I know. Walnuts get a special mention. They contain omega-3 fatty acids, similar to what's found in fish. Some research suggests walnuts may help improve insulin sensitivity and reduce low-grade inflammation. Helpful? Absolutely. But nuts aren't the food I recommend most either. They play a supporting role, an important one, but the real standout works through mechanisms that go much deeper, and we're almost there. But first, let me touch on whole grains for a moment, because this is an area where a lot of people get confused. And clearing it up matters. When I say whole grains, I don't mean white bread or white rice. Those have been stripped of their fiber and processed in ways that spike blood sugar fast. I mean intact, minimally processed grains, steel-cut oats, barley, quinoa. Oats contain a special fiber called beta-glucan. It forms a thick gel in your digestive system that slows glucose absorption. Studies show that regular oat consumption is linked to improved blood sugar control after meals. But not all oatmeal is the same. Those flavored instant packets can have as much added sugar as a candy bar. Your best bet is plain steel-cut or rolled oats. Add some berries and walnuts, and you've already combined 3 of the foods we've talked about in one bowl. Quick note on barley. It actually contains even more beta-glucan than oats, and the research on barley and blood sugar is quite strong. You can use it in soups or as a side dish in place of white rice. Now, we are almost there, but before I share the food I recommend most, I need to explain one more concept, because without this piece, you won't fully understand why the top food is so powerful. And what I'm about to explain is something most people have never been told. It ties everything together. Something is happening inside your body right now that has a powerful effect on blood sugar. It has nothing to do with your pancreas or insulin directly. It has to do with your gut. Inside your intestines live trillions of tiny microorganisms, mostly bacteria. Together, they form what scientists call the gut microbiome. And research over the past 15 years has revealed something remarkable. These bacteria don't just help you digest food, they directly influence how your body handles blood sugar. When your gut microbiome is healthy and diverse, your body tends to manage glucose better. When it falls out of balance, blood sugar regulation suffers. So, what supports a healthy gut? Two things. First, fiber. The good bacteria in your gut feed on it. When they break fiber down, they produce short-chain fatty acids. These compounds have been shown to improve insulin sensitivity and calm systemic inflammation. Second, fermented foods. Plain yogurt with live cultures, kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi. These foods add beneficial bacteria directly to your system. A study from Stanford found that people who ate fermented foods regularly for 10 weeks showed significant increases in gut microbial diversity and meaningful decreases in inflammatory markers. That connection between gut health and blood sugar regulation is one of the most exciting areas of current research. While we're here, let me briefly address two things you've probably heard about. Cinnamon and apple cider vinegar. People ask me about these constantly, so here's where the evidence actually stands. Some studies have found that cinnamon, particularly Ceylon cinnamon, may have a modest effect on fasting blood sugar. Certain compounds in it may help cells respond slightly better to insulin, but the research is mixed. Some studies show a small benefit, others show nothing. If you enjoy cinnamon on your oatmeal, keep using it, but don't count on it as a primary strategy. It's a nice extra, not a foundation. Apple cider vinegar is similar. A few small studies suggest that a tablespoon before a meal may slightly reduce the post-meal blood sugar spike. The acetic acid appears to slow starch digestion, but the evidence is limited and the effect is modest. If you want to try it, dilute a tablespoon in water and use a straw to protect your tooth enamel. Both are fine additions. Neither is the answer on its own. I also want to mention fatty fish before we move on. Salmon, sardines, mackerel, these are rich in omega-3 fatty acids, which research consistently links to lower inflammation. And since chronic inflammation is one of the key engines driving insulin resistance, omega-3s can help your cells respond to insulin more effectively. Eating fatty fish 2 or 3 times a week is what most health organizations recommend, but even fatty fish, as valuable as it is, doesn't have the breadth of evidence that the next food has. Nothing we've covered so far does. Now, here's why I saved the gut microbiome for right before this moment, because the food I've been building toward this entire conversation doesn't just check one box. It doesn't check two. It checks nearly every single one we've talked about: fiber, protein, gut support, insulin sensitivity, blood sugar control after meals, long-term glucose management. No other affordable everyday food does all of that at once. This is the food that, in my view, has earned the #1 spot. Beans, lentils, chickpeas, black beans, kidney beans, pinto beans. This whole family of foods called legumes has been studied over and over, and the evidence keeps piling up in the same direction. Let me explain why legumes stand apart from everything else we've covered today, because it's not just one thing, it's the combination. Start with soluble fiber. Legumes are one of the richest sources on the planet. Soluble fiber is the kind that dissolves in water and forms a thick, gel-like substance in your digestive tract. When that gel forms, it physically slows down how quickly glucose gets absorbed into your bloodstream. Picture it like this. Imagine pouring water through a thick sponge versus pouring it straight from the faucet. The sponge slows everything down. That's what soluble fiber does inside your intestines. Your blood sugar rises more gradually, doesn't spike as high, and comes back down more smoothly. But soluble fiber is just the beginning. Legumes also contain something called resistant starch. This is a type of starch that your body doesn't fully digest. Instead of being broken down into glucose, resistant starch passes through your upper digestive system mostly intact and reaches your lower intestine, where your gut bacteria feed on it. And what happens when those gut bacteria feed on resistant starch? They produce those same short-chain fatty acids I mentioned earlier, the ones that have been shown to improve insulin sensitivity and reduce inflammation. Here's something even more interesting about resistant starch. When you cook beans and then let them cool, the amount of resistant starch actually increases. So a pot of lentil soup made the night before and eaten cold or reheated the next day may have even more of this beneficial starch. The same goes for bean salads eaten at room temperature. The cooling process changes the starch structure in a way that makes it more resistant to digestion. That's free additional benefit just from how you prepare and store them. So, with one single food, you're getting a fiber that slows glucose absorption, a starch that feeds beneficial bacteria in your gut, the production of compounds that help your cells respond to insulin. And all of this happens naturally without any special preparation or expensive ingredients. I don't know of another common everyday food that does all of those things at once. And that's exactly why the research keeps coming back to legumes. But there's more. Legumes are also an excellent source of plant-based protein. And protein, like fiber, slows down digestion. So when you combine the soluble fiber, the resistant starch, and the protein naturally present in a serving of black beans or lentils, you get a food that releases its energy slowly and steadily over hours. No sharp spike, no crash afterward, just a long, gentle curve. Compare that to a slice of white bread, where the sugar hits your blood almost immediately and disappears just as fast, leaving you hungry again within an hour. The difference is dramatic. Same number of calories potentially, but completely different effects on your blood sugar. And here's what makes the case for legumes truly compelling. It's not just theory. The clinical research on legumes and blood sugar is among the strongest in all of nutrition science. This isn't one study in one lab. It's a pattern that shows up across dozens of studies in different populations over many years. One well-known study looked at people with type 2 diabetes who ate about a cup of legumes daily for 3 months. At the end of those 3 months, participants saw meaningful improvements in their hemoglobin A1C. That's the blood test that shows your average blood sugar over the previous 2 to 3 months. It's one of the most important numbers your doctor tracks, and beans moved it in the right direction. Other studies have found that simply adding legumes to a meal reduces the blood sugar spike from that meal, not just a little bit, by a noticeable amount. The soluble fiber creates that gel I described, the protein slows digestion, and the resistant starch feeds the gut bacteria that help regulate glucose. Everything works together. Let me tell you about a man I know, retired, early 70s. He'd been a meat and potatoes guy his entire life. The idea of eating lentil soup sounded about as appealing as a trip to the dentist. His wife had been reading about blood sugar and started making a simple black bean chili on weekends. He tried it reluctantly at first, but he noticed something he didn't expect. On the days he ate the chili for lunch, he wasn't ravenous by 3 o'clock. That constant afternoon urge to grab crackers or cookies had quieted down. The fiber was keeping him full. And when you're not snacking between meals, your blood sugar stays more stable throughout the entire day. At his next checkup, his A1C had come down, not a dramatic drop, a steady one. His doctor was pleased and asked what he'd changed. When he said beans 3 or 4 times a week, his doctor nodded. That tracks, his doctor told him. That's the thing about legumes. The results aren't flashy. They don't promise miracles overnight. But the consistency of the evidence is remarkable. Study after study, year after year, beans keep showing up as one of the most reliable foods for blood sugar support. I want to share one more story because this one stays with me. A grandmother I know, 74 years old, had been diagnosed with prediabetes. Her fasting blood sugar was high enough that her doctor was considering starting medication. She was nervous about it. She asked what else she could do. Her daughter, who'd been reading about nutrition, helped her start cooking more beans at home. Simple things. A pot of lentil soup on Sunday afternoons. Chickpeas tossed into her lunchtime salad. Black beans stirred into rice at dinner. Nothing complicated. Nothing she couldn't manage on her own. Just legumes showing up on her plate 4 or 5 times a week alongside the foods she already enjoyed. When she went back 3 months later, her fasting blood sugar had improved. Not enough to declare victory, but enough that her doctor agreed to hold off on medication and give the dietary changes more time. She cried in the office. Not because the number was perfect, but because she felt like she had some control over what was happening in her body. That sense of control means everything when you're facing a diagnosis that can feel overwhelming. 6 months in, the improvement held steady. She told me she was amazed that something she could buy for less than $2 could make that kind of difference. And I'll be honest, stories like hers are the reason I feel so strongly about sharing this information. Now, I want to be careful here. Not everyone will have that experience. Every person's body is different. Some people will still need medication, and that's perfectly fine. But the fact that something as affordable and available as a can of beans can meaningfully support blood sugar management is, in my view, one of the most underappreciated facts in health. And here's one more reason beans deserve the top spot. They're practical. A can of black beans costs about $1. A bag of dried lentils costs even less and makes multiple servings. You don't need a specialty grocery store. You don't need a prescription. You don't need a blender or a juicer or any fancy equipment. Beans are available everywhere, in every neighborhood, at every budget level. That matters because the most powerful food in the world doesn't help anyone if they can't afford it or can't find it. And the versatility is something people underestimate. Lentils cook in about 20 minutes without soaking. Black beans work in soups, chili, burritos, salads, and rice bowls. Chickpeas can be roasted for a crunchy snack, blended into hummus, or tossed into a stir fry. White beans are wonderful in stews. You could eat legumes every day for a month and never repeat the same meal. Some people worry about digestive discomfort when they start eating more beans. That's a real concern, and I don't want to brush it aside. The key is to start small, a quarter cup a day at first. Let your gut bacteria adjust over a couple of weeks. Rinse canned beans thoroughly, which removes some of the compounds that cause gas, and increase gradually. Most people find that their digestion adapts within a few weeks and the discomfort fades. So when I look at the full picture, the depth of the research, the multiple mechanisms working together, the affordability, the availability, the versatility, I keep coming back to the same conclusion. If I could recommend one food for blood sugar support, it would be legumes. Every time. Now let me bring everything together because none of these foods works in isolation. Think of it like a team. Beans are your star player, they do the most work, but the other foods we talked about today strengthen the whole roster. Leafy greens supply the magnesium your body needs for insulin to function properly. Berries deliver anthocyanins that may improve insulin sensitivity and reduce inflammation. Nuts act as a speed bump that slows glucose absorption at meals. Whole grains like oats and barley add beta-glucan fiber. Fatty fish contribute omega-3s that help calm the chronic inflammation behind insulin resistance. And fermented foods support the gut microbiome that influences blood sugar in ways we're only beginning to fully understand. When you eat these foods together, they don't just add up, they amplify each other. Here's a simple meal that captures almost everything we discussed, and it takes about 10 minutes. Take a bowl. Start with a generous base of leafy greens. Spinach or mixed greens work well. Add a big scoop of cooked lentils or black beans. That's your star player right there. Top it with a small handful of walnuts or almonds. Put some blueberries on the side or toss them right in. If you like, drizzle a little olive oil and a squeeze of fresh lemon over everything. That one bowl covers greens for magnesium, legumes for soluble fiber, resistant starch, and plant protein, nuts for healthy fat, berries for anthocyanins. It's colorful, it's satisfying, and every ingredient is working with your blood sugar instead of against it. You could eat a version of that bowl several times a week and never get tired of it because you can swap the ingredients around. Use chickpeas one day and black beans the next. Try arugula instead of spinach. Add avocado. Sprinkle some seeds on top. The core stays the same, but the flavors change. One more thing worth knowing. Some newer research suggests that the order you eat your food may matter. Eating your vegetables and protein before your carbohydrates at a meal appears to reduce the blood sugar spike afterward. The fiber and protein create a buffer that slows everything down. You don't have to change what you eat, just the order. Vegetables and protein first, starches last. Now, I want to say something important because I think you deserve the full truth. Food matters. These changes are meaningful. But for many people, food alone is not enough. If your doctor has prescribed medication for blood sugar, please keep taking it. Don't stop because you started eating more beans this week. Medication and good food aren't competitors, they're partners. The foods I've talked about today can support what your medication is already doing, and over time, with your doctor's guidance, improvements in diet and lifestyle may allow your doctor to make adjustments, but that's a conversation between you and your physician, not something to decide from a video. I bring this up because I care about the people listening to these conversations. I've seen what happens when someone gets excited about a natural approach and drops their medication too quickly. It can be dangerous. The safe path is always to add good foods while continuing your doctor's plan. Let the results speak for themselves over time and let your physician make the calls about medication. And let me say one more thing about expectations, because this matters. You don't need to be perfect. You don't have to eat beans at every meal starting tomorrow. You don't have to throw out everything in your pantry and start over. That kind of all or nothing thinking is exactly what causes people to give up after 2 weeks. The people who see the best results are the ones who make small, doable changes and stick with them for months, not days, not weeks, months. Add legumes 3 or 4 times a week, toss some spinach into your next meal, keep a bag of walnuts in the pantry, buy a pint of blueberries this weekend. Small steps, steady progress. That's what works. Blood sugar management isn't a sprint, it's a long, steady walk, and the people who do best are the ones who find a pace they can keep without burning out. So if you take one thing from today, let it be this: beans, lentils, chickpeas, black beans, whatever legume appeals to you most. Make it a regular part of your week. You don't need a fancy recipe. A can of beans added to a soup, a salad, or a bowl of rice is enough to start. The research supports it. The cost is low, the preparation is simple, and your body will respond. Every meal is a chance to send your blood sugar in a better direction, not through perfection, not through deprivation, through one smart choice at a time. If something from today resonated with you, I'd love to hear about it. Which food surprised you the most? Have you tried adding beans to your meals? How did it go? Drop a comment and tell me about your experience. I read them. And your story might be the one that helps someone else take their first step. I hope this was useful to you. If someone you care about is watching their blood sugar, a spouse, a friend, a parent, a neighbor, consider passing this along. Sometimes one conversation about food is all it takes to change the direction of someone's health. Now, today we focused on food, and these strategies matter. But there's another factor that affects blood sugar just as powerfully, and almost nobody explains it correctly. It has to do with something you do every single night, or at least something you're supposed to do every night. When it goes wrong, your blood sugar can suffer even if your diet is perfect. That's exactly what I'll walk you through next time. You won't want to miss it. Take care of yourself. You're worth it.